This next panel, I'm really excited about it for a lot of reasons. When this vision of this gathering was coming through, what I really was paying attention to was how significant my perception of this moment in time is around what women have to offer and contribute. And I think what we can all admit, or should admit, is we're in a patriarchal system, and we have been for thousands of years, and we're all indoctrinated into that system in ways that we don't even know how to question. And I think as women, there is an extraordinary opportunity to use our unique ways of knowing, our unique way of leading, our cultivating from a relational perspective, less from a transactional one, to create new ways of creating fundamentally. This time in our history as human beings, we are witnessing extraordinary impacts from our activities as humans, and the way that we've been generating has been extractive, degrading, and disrespectful. And nature has often been the deep victim of that, and women being associated with nature have shared that same impact. So this next panel has some incredible women that I'm excited for you to hear from. We're so grateful to Susan for being our moderator, to Liza, Clarenda, Lara, and Angela for speaking about what is unique about women's leadership and why it matters. Let us welcome, with our hands raised, these amazing women. Thank you.
Thank you, Selene. Ooh, what a great introduction. I just love your framing of this panel. And it was so fun when we met ahead of time and had a chance to kind of share some ideas and experiences. And we generated so many questions ourselves, but we're going to try to jump into those. And we hope that you will also engage with us by letting us know what your questions are later on in our time together. So my name is Susan Skjei, and I've been a leadership coach and consultant for many, many years, sometimes inside organizations, sometimes externally. Right now I'm external and working with many different groups and individuals. And I'll just do a little framing of the topic in addition to what Selene already gave us, and then I'm going to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So, we're just coming off of COVID. And I know some of us feel like, well, we're not really off of it yet. It's still happening. But it's such a great case study, I think, of the power of women's leadership. As I was doing a little bit of research, I found that women have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. As we know, many people have lost their jobs and also had to be primary caretakers and juggling many, many different roles. But at the same time, if we look at kind of an international level, we see that even though women only make up 8% of the political leaders globally, they've had over 40% of the most effective responses to COVID, with a 6 times lower death rate than those countries led by their male counterparts. So there are so many things to be proud of, and so many people to be excited about and to see as role models. Some of those role models are here, and I'm really excited to have our panelists introduce themselves. So why don't we begin with you, Liza? I'd love to hear your Hawaiian name pronounced. I saw it spelled, and I wanted you to tell us, how is it pronounced? But also to tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Thank you to Regenerative Rising and all of the women who put this event together, and all of the hands that have joined together to create today. I just want to thank everybody My name is Liza Keānuenueokalani Williams. I am Kanaka Maoli, otherwise known as Native Hawaiian, from Hawaii. My middle name is something that is really important for me to add to my public kind of persona, I guess, or my scholarly work or anything that I do in the world, because it has really grounded and rooted me in who I am and how I was raised in a very Hawaiian community and with very strong Hawaiian women. I currently work as the Director of Cultural Transformation for Planet Women. Planet Women is a startup nonprofit, and we work on empowering communities of women to work on creating solutions for climate crisis and environmental protection. We really believe in elevating women's voices, ideas, and creating solutions that are community oriented and decolonizing. My background, I do have a PhD in American Studies, and so I don't come from a conservation background, but I do come from a training that has taught me to see systems. And so I bring that knowledge with me to Planet Women to think about how we can build a world with systems that are not so patriarchal, that are more circular and community oriented. Thank you. So that's my introduction.
Thank you, Liza. Farmer C, love to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Clarenda Stanley, also known as Farmer C. And I will open with the role in my life that I'm most proud of, because I find that oftentimes I would show up to spaces, I would lead with credentials, as if I needed to provide some other validation other than my presence, and I don't. So the role I am most proud of, I am a farmer, and I am at my farm, and you may hear some equipment in the background, as this is a very busy time for us. I built Green Heffa Farms, a medicinal plants and herb farm here in Liberty, North Carolina, so that for a lot of reasons, for the planet, organic and regenerative, for the people, I wanted to bring quality medicinal herbs in ways that I had not seen on the market. And then, of course, for my progeny, I happen to be the blessed BB, grandmother to 5 beautiful souls. Now, all of that sounds really good, but one of the primary reasons was just somewhere that I, as a Black woman, could have some peace, where I could enjoy nature, where I could contribute to the environment in a way that is not an ongoing battle in spaces that were honestly not created with my well-being in mind. And so enter into these conversations oftentimes knowing that that may be a challenge or a tension point for some conversation, but still being willing to show up and have the conversation. So I come with a background as of actually Monday. So as of Monday, that was my first day that I no longer pull 80-hour weeks. In addition to running my farm, I also was a global environmental fundraiser for a large environmental nonprofit. I worked high net worth individuals, helping them direct their philanthropy in the environmental space. And I learned a lot operating in those rooms, and many times would be the only Black woman in those rooms. And so I decided to switch hats and take off my fundraising hat. And as of Monday, full-time, I am a farmer at Green Heffa Farms and contributing to the conversation, still meaningfully, but in a way that allows me to bring my full and whole self. So I said a lot. Whew, okay. Had to get that off my chest, y'all, so we can lay the energy. But I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, you said a lot. And wow, it was very inspiring. I love that you're leading from roles rather than credentials. And it seems like that's also similar to what Liza was saying, of focusing more on relationships and on the circularity of our interactions with one another rather than hierarchy. So thanks. Angie, let's hear from you.
Hi, everybody. First of all, Pharmacy, congratulations. That's an exciting transition as of yesterday. So good for you. I'm excited for you. My name is Angie, and I am here because I'm just a big believer in the power of women in forming community. So during the day, I lead innovation and business development for a food company in Chicago called John B. Sanfilippo and Son. We're a purveyor of nuts. And in my spare time, I love to help women in business and in life thrive. And so part of how I came to be on this panel is through an association with Lara. I work with OSC and JEDI Collaborative, and we have been running peer mentoring circles for female leaders in the natural product space for the past 2 years. I come from over 2 decades of being the lucky recipient of being in mentoring circles with women, both in my prior career at General Mills, my current job at JBSS, and then also now with the JEDI Collaborative and OSC. And so I just get to see the power of women coming together and what we can do for each other, even if we may be in only or a few in our day-to-day life. We are not in our industries, and we are certainly not in the world. And so I just believe in the power of us coming together, and excited to talk about that today.
Thanks so much, Angie. And Lara, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Susan. Oh my gosh, Angie and Susan, I have profound respect for your contributions and how you've taught me, and Angie for your amazing work with women and women's circles. And I'm really looking forward to everyone hearing more about the work and that you're thinking about. And Pharmacy, Clarenda, and Liza, wow. I just feel honored to actually be here. And so I want to share more about maybe just lightly my journey in the context of women that I've come to know. So I have about 25 years background in what you call the consumer products industry, and about 10 or 11 years ago recognized how many of the brands, including one that I worked on a long time ago that was growing and had all kinds of passion, sustainability, equity built in DNA, when they're gobbled up by larger CPG companies and not protected and nurtured and defended and empowered financially in many other ways, they lose the heart and soul of who they are and the contributions and gifts they can give to our food system. And so I co-founded One Step Closer, which is a network of leaders and CEOs with missions in the natural products industry. And from that, we've really been able to springboard not just the leadership and elevating that leadership, and also really looking at ourselves and bringing a more diversity of thought and perspective and identity into our CEO leadership, but also launched 3 collaborative platforms. So I co-founded OSC with a man of color. We were the onlys in the room among all white men starting the organization. And then I found a few years later, very shortly after, one of the biggest challenges we observed as leaders and influencers in the industry was packaging waste, and how CPG is rampantly causing that and much more. And so we launched the Packaging Collaborative. And the person who stepped up and saw that personally and professionally from her time in the Peace Corps, watching litter just and no place to go in the Caribbean, to her own expertise, was the only woman in the room. And she's led that collaborative with me for almost 9 years, and been a deep voice of commitment, going just from not from her day job to full time as a packaging expert. And from that, I recognized with, that there were bigger things, and I started to really listen and have the privilege to be in a room to listen and learn, and also herd a lot of cats and lead them in what was most pressing. And when we had a group of climate scientists come in and listen to gloom and doom with this network of CEOs, there was only one other woman in the room with me, and she and I happened to be nursing mothers at the time. In fact, she was sitting in the room as the co-founder of Happy Family, in a live room with a room full of men nursing. And she was listening. And I was listening. And she called me later and said, you know, there wasn't a lot positive. I'm kind of freaking out. And what are we going to do about it? And she was the only one who came forward and said that. And from that, we birthed the Climate Collaborative, which now has over 800 companies working very hard in the food system to reverse climate change with us. But from that, I recognized, wow, the biggest solution to climate change is empowerment and uplifting of women, particularly those of marginalized identities. And looking around in at least the natural products and CPG industry, there weren't very many women in leadership positions, and there weren't many people of different and underrepresented identities in the room. Very few. It was shocking. And what does that mean for how we raise up our food system and how we actually shift how we work and support what farmers see and so many others are doing and their gifts and treasures? And so we launched the JEDI Collaborative 2 years ago. And that has been a very big journey that I think I've learned as much from as anyone. And it's a whole platform for action and learning initiatives for the industry. And Angie has been a very pivotal and formidable part of that, leading the women's circles, purely through her expertise and experience and passion. And so I'm again here to support the work of all of you and be in support. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lara. You know, as we were having our original conversation to kind of prep for the panel, a bunch of different questions came out, as I mentioned before, but we thought it might be fun to kind of have an arc of our conversation where we start with what we're inspired by. And, you know, I think this question of what do you see when women are empowered to lead might be a really good place to start. And also maybe some of the female leaders that you admire, if you want to throw that in as well. I know that each of you come from really different backgrounds and perspectives, and so it'd be fun to hear. Is anybody feeling like they want to talk about what do you see when women are empowered to lead? You could speak for yourself. What do you do when you're empowered to lead?
I can go ahead, Susan.
Good.
Yeah, that's such a great question. You know, I've been really fortunate throughout my career and different stages that I've been at to have been mentored by really strong women. When I was working like the one time with a man, when I was putting together my dissertation committee for my PhD, he was my chair, and it just was not working. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel like my ideas were being validated and valued. I felt like I was being pushed into a direction rather than allowed to think about what wanted to come through me. And I really wanted my work to be grounded in my culture and in the ways that I was raised with really strong women. And so I made the very difficult decision to not be mentored under him. And I switched to another scholar, a woman, and she was really a champion for me. And it was then when I really realized, you know, this, for me, it's the strength of women coming together to join in collaboration. And that's what I think happens when women partner together. That collaboration and that camaraderie kind of grows from that space, especially when there's an awareness of wanting to create something different than the patriarchy. Because women, you know, as women, we're in the patriarchy as well. And so we can replicate those systems just as easily. We have to keep our mind on wanting to do them in different ways and actually choose to do them in different ways. And so that's been something that has really shaped the trajectory of my career. And I really want to say, I want to give a shout out to my CEO at Planet Women, Christine Ziegler. She is one of the most amazing women leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with. She is a true mentor. When I speak to her on our check-ins, she really listens. She really gives me the runway to create and to advocate for my ideas and for myself. And I think that she's a true role model for a woman leader, and especially women CEOs. So
wow, how lucky are you to actually
very
for someone you admire and respect.
Yeah.
I see a note in the chat. Diana is saying, when women lead, I typically sense a shift from competition to collaboration. Who else would like to comment?
Chime in a little bit on this. In general, when I see women lead, I see an improvement in environments and cultures, whether it's internal from the work culture or it's some external impact in general. However, we women know that we're not monolithic. And even though there may be some general improvements, there also may be some increased inequities or unaddressed inequities. So for me, it really depends on the situation, because there's still so many conversations that need to be had within the collective of women, and a realization that we're not all acting very sisterly towards each other. And we're not all, acting as if we are a collective. And yes, patriarchy is an issue. It definitely is something that we all feel the oppression from. But then there are some other things that some of us feel, others may not. Yeah. And we need to have some conversations about those. And so I don't necessarily walk into a space and see all women and feel this kumbaya, my spirit is at rest, I am amongst my sisters. No, I walk in a situation and I feel less threatened than I would if it were a room full of men, especially if it's a room full of white men. That makes me real nervous. Anytime I see a lot of them together and they have important titles, I'm like, what are y'all in here talking about amongst yourselves? But yeah, in general, though, there is an improvement, because we women just tap into certain spaces within ourselves that I do feel is inherent to women.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up that very important topic. And there are so many things about how women work with one another and just our social location that needs to be more transparent and a topic of conversation, rather than just assuming that we understand one another or that we know where each other are coming from. Laura, are you ready to jump in?
Well, I think what Clarenda said was very important and resonant, and we all recognize that women have the opportunity and the potential to be our best leaders. And Celine, you certainly brought that up at the beginning in terms of the leadership response to COVID. And I see it too, with, as I mentioned, the co-founders of every collaborative I've launched, Packaging, Climate, and the JEDI Collaborative, are 100% women. And that was not by design. They were the women who stepped up. They also happened to be very empowered and already in a place to be able to step up. And when I see that, those are the women who've come to a certain place, arrived, usually done some deep personal work because they've struggled a lot along the way to get there. And they typically step up for other women and advocate. And there aren't enough of us. There aren't enough of us. And that's the piece. I mean, I think at least psychologically, I'd love to hear more, Liza, from you and everyone on what at least I think we feel and observe, which is, in the larger picture, the women's movement over the last, past 50, 100 plus years, didn't recognize that it wasn't just about women who were primarily white. It was about all women, and also all underrepresented identities. And that there's a lot of growing knowledge out there, something called universal targeted universalism, which we embed, but not with that big name, in the JEDI Collaborative, is that when you focus on those most marginalized, the intersectional women, typically women of color, Black women, Indigenous women, and beyond, that lifts all boats, because we learn how to be better people at every level and compassionate versus just stick up for ourselves. And when that happens, we become better leaders. And so that's a big reason why we shifted from, with JEDI Collaborative, from being about to really focus on those that have deserve and warrant the most focus and support.
Thank you. And we also see situations where women marginalize other women, and where women disempower other women.
Yeah.
Angie, I want to invite you to speak to either the previous comment or question about, what inspires you, but also maybe to bring in some of your expertise around, what gets in the way.
Yeah. Well, I would say what inspires me is I see a lot of women really rising to the challenges that exist in society today at a level that we really need them to do. I think that's one of the things that has happened the most in the past years. And so you reference some of what's been happening during COVID for women, right? Women have disproportionately been impacted, but women have also disproportionately risen to the occasion to lead in a different way. One of my favorite studies is the annual study that McKinsey and Lean In does every year on the state of women in the workplace. And that was the big theme that came out of the year in COVID, is that women really rose to the occasion. We're seen by all as stronger leaders, people first leaders, leaders who cared about individuals, who really took their teams through what was a crisis, and invested in themselves in a differential way and in others in a differential way. They differentially are leading diversity, equity, and inclusion work in their companies. And they're also differentially exhausted because of it too, and burnt out. And so it is like a dichotomy that is very real with women. And I saw that during our peer mentoring circles. We started the JEDI peer mentoring circles during the depths of COVID. And what I love the JEDI peer mentoring circles is how diverse they are. They are the most diverse environment that I've ever been able to be in with all women at one time. And it has been remarkable to be able to see in real life what others have studied, to be able to hear from women who were really rising to the occasion in very difficult times. Every single woman had some sort of massive change in their personal and professional life, how invested they were in their teams and their cultures, and really helping people through a difficult time. And then on the flip side, how exhausted and burnt out they were because of that extra work. And that theme has continued in our circles this year as well. And so to me, I think one of the key takeaways is I'm so thankful for that. I see that in my own company. I see what women are doing. We're doing a lot, that is making a big difference in people's lives. And then I also see the toll that it is taking on women, where women are literally exhausted. And that is not happening with our male counterparts. And so to me, that's one of the key themes right now, is how can we support women differentially, all women differentially, particularly if you're a woman of color. You are giving more and you are even more burnt out, right? Every trend is even more exacerbated. And so how can we support each other now? Because I believe the world needs women and our innate leadership style now more than ever. Because if now is not the time to care about people on the planet, I literally don't know when it will be, given the state of the state that we are living in. And so that's where I spend a lot of my time during the day, but also nights and weekends. It's just thinking through how do we help each other more? And I find when women help each other more, we get more energy from each other, we get inspired, we get connected, and our cup can fill in a way that we can keep going, right? I find my personal energy source, and I think for a lot of women, is other women being connected. in different ways. And it doesn't have to be in your company. It can be through different community groups. But that I think women supporting each other can be like a supercharge for what we need right now more than ever.
Thank you. No kidding. And, you know, it relates to what Liza was saying earlier about changing her dissertation chair. And there's actually a statistic related to this, that women who are mentored by other women are 30% more likely to be successful. Isn't that cool? And I'm just wondering what your experience is of mentoring or being mentored. And we have a great question in the chat that kind of relates to this. What has been one of the most impactful self-work kinds of things that you've done, you know, cultivating yourself? And this, I think, links to connecting with others, but also with self-care. So feel free to kind of get where you want to, and whoever feels inspired to jump in, please do.
Jump in.
Okay.
I love that question. What has been the most impactful self-work that has prepared you for becoming a leader? Because I really see that self-work as extremely integral to being able to show up as your best self and to bring all of your energy to the projects that are fueling your passion and that you're working on. For me, that I've really had to cultivate circles of women outside of my like day job projects, where we can speak more at the level of the mother at motherhood, or at the spiritual level, or, you know, a more artistic level or activist level. Not that it's separate from the other things, but it's just a different kind of a tone and a different collaboration. And it's where I think in those spaces where I've really learned about a different way of leading within the circle. So every woman that comes is coming from a different background, from a different set of experiences. We all have different oppressions that we experience, and they're not the same for every woman. But when we come together in the spirit of collaboration and allow all the voices to be heard, people are both teacher and student within the circle, and there is not one person that stands above the rest. And so for me, these kind of like healing circles that I've been a part of, community circles and things, have been really like necessary. I don't think I would be able to have the energy for the difficult other scholarly work or activist work that I do without those circles.
Thank you, Liza. Clarenda, did you have a comment?
I didn't, but I'll chime in as
Okay.
far as self-work. Or did Liza want to answer this? Because you had another question that you had, Susan.
Yeah, it was about mentoring or being
Yeah.
or being a mentor.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you can respond to anything that we've been talking about. Just take it away.
Yeah, go ahead, Pharmacy.
Okay. I don't care for mentoring too much. I think it's a power dynamics type situation. So I do value knowledge exchanges, because I find that everybody coming into one of those connections has knowledge that they bring with them. And oftentimes we discount what we know because maybe someone else has more credentials, or, you know, or have a more senior position. But I think that we miss the learning opportunity when we do that. So yeah, you may know, you know, molecular biology, but I know how to get your angles right on your selfie so you can look better in these photos. So it's an exchange. Regarding the self-work, I think one of the biggest things for me was getting that imposter syndrome energy off me, and feeling like I didn't deserve to be in certain spaces or in certain conversations, or just sometimes that I didn't deserve. Like if I found myself actually being like, oh, I might be, this feels good. It's like, well, but do you deserve calling yourself a farmer when you just started in 2018? Should you be selling herbal teas and, you know, those types of things? And then I realized after being in a lot of rooms with a lot of supposedly smart people that a lot of them aren't that smart. And no, I do deserve to be in these conversations, and I do deserve to be able to attain a quality of life that allows me to be my full and an authentic self. And so that's an ongoing process. As business grows, as things happen, I'm always, you know, there's that little voice that's like, wait a minute now, should you, little girl from the Black Belt of Alabama, be in these spaces? But I have to silence that, to be like, you darn right, I deserve to be in these spaces, and add a little flavor to the conversation.
Thank you. Wow, that's inspiring. Megan in the chat is saying, I grew up being taught that other women were competition, so they were enemies, not sisters. I still see women tear other women down often. Unlearning this is something I still work on to this day. These panelists and this event is one way I do this. Thanks all. Little pat on the back there, people. Any comments about this? You know, how do we shift our perspective from treating one another as competitors?
I can respond to that a little bit, and I think it links a little bit even to the past question. In terms of I've found, but I don't think all of us have, that I didn't know or have a lot of mentors who were women, and maybe I didn't know how to seek them out, and that may have, I think I could have learned a lot more faster about myself if I had that, and again, a lot of that happens in a patriarchal society. I think it's very challenging when you're really one of the few to not look around and need, and there's psychological reasons that I don't purport to be experts on that cause us to want to maintain and grow that spot when there aren't very many of them. And that is not necessarily inherent that women don't support each other as a part of our biological imperative. I believe it's the opposite. But the current situation does compel women and frankly all people to oftentimes not support each other if there aren't believed to be a lot of open slots or opportunities. I found on that side, and many, because I think women become a little bit lonely or isolated, particularly during COVID, but in general, we seek answers and about ourselves, as well as how we can grow. And you know, whether we have trauma, and unfortunately, I often have seen that trauma or challenge is what causes all of us, particularly women, to become more conscious, because you have to do the work to overcome it. You know, for me or for anyone, I mean, there's stuff, and frankly, well, I've all got it. I had no idea. I thought I had a great life. I came from a very loving family, and I also didn't realize how incredibly emotionally volatile it was. And so we've all got that hardwiring. But for me, that meant being really calm and responding and having answers for every single thing happening around me growing up. And that continued. And it worked for a long time until it didn't anymore. You know, suddenly I have 3 kids and a climate collaborative and a packaging collaborative and a community and a kid with special needs and all these other things. And then all kinds of unexpected challenges coming on top of it. I think a lot of women just step back and go, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm not even myself anymore. And so that overwhelm, whether we need it or not, I'm not sure, but it often, I've seen women be able to step beyond that through personal inquiry and self-care, and start to recognize the power of other women and empowering other women and supporting other women, as Angie has talked about. And oftentimes, I mean, I don't know what it is, but I believe that women actually rise up from challenge and trauma and see need in a stronger way than women, and particularly perhaps that's a biological imperative of birthing a project or birthing a person or birthing something. But that is a very big challenge. And if we can take on those challenges, we're, I think, biologically hardwired to take on bigger ones with spaciousness, great spaciousness, and also consciousness. That when I see women overcome something, that consciousness, that humility, and that openness is big. One of the biggest things I learned is that in constantly responding to everything and needing to make sure it was safe because we kept everything going and smooth and I had every answer, I was holding way too much. And that actually appeared or looked like power. And even though I didn't know I was holding power, I probably was in a lot of ways. And one of the biggest parts of personal care I've had, I've had a lot of different kinds. You know, there's every kind, and I support all of them in your own custom blend because we are all unique and will respond to different things. But one of the things that was moving for me was actually sitting in circle with a group of people I respected, with, believe it or not, a Native American and an indigenous ceremony where it got deeper and much more conscious, and started to realize that, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to be here having all the answers and knowing what's going on. I'm actually everybody here. I'm supposed to be working with everybody here. They know this person knows this person knows this, and I need to sit back and hold the space and then integrate that. And that was a profound shift for me that I also think is a profound power for women, to be able to hold the space, listen, and then integrate and move forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you covered so many different things. And I think one of the things that is really resonating with me is just the power of self-care. That if we don't love ourselves, it's very difficult for us to love other women. You know, if we don't befriend ourselves, it's hard to befriend others. And no matter how much we try to do, if we haven't done that fundamental work, everything else becomes sort of a task. Sherry has a very interesting question in the chat. And Sherry, I'm wondering if you'd like to just come on and ask your question to the panel.
Oh, that's intimidating, being the first person to ask a question live.
Oh, no, but your question is so great. We'd love to hear it.
Thank you. And I almost didn't send it because I just wasn't sure. So, you know, I always try to approach these conversations from, you know, when we talk about the patriarchy and how toxic it is, right? And it's also very, very true that men have just been engulfed, conditioned, have lived this life for so long. I don't even know if half the time they know what they're doing, right? So I'm wondering, you know, in this space of leadership where you all have obviously been successful and are sitting in this very beautiful space of feminine leadership, how can we approach feminine leadership, women in leadership roles, in a way where we're kind of actually acknowledging this isn't man against woman. This is like just breaking up of this toxic masculinity, or whatever phrase you want to put on it. But this conditioning that is so embedded in these men who have this power and have this control and have all of these things, and they don't even realize how toxic it is, right? So how do we approach this in a way that we can kind of acknowledge that this is a broken system and that it's not necessarily man against women? Although then I read Amy's comment that she just put up there where people are advising her to walk into a room like a man. Like, this is a real challenge that we have, right? So many women that step into leadership don't even get heard unless you act like a man. And I just wonder, as an example of women who have risen in leadership and then are becoming powerful examples in leadership, how do you approach those conversations with men? Are you finding men like seeing this? Because in my work within Rhythm, I saw some pretty amazing men that are very open and very, very aware of what is happening. But So I would just love to hear thoughts and feedback on that.
Angie, do you have a
Oh
comment?
my gosh, well, that's a great question, a deep one, and I do not profess to know all the answers, but I will share a few thoughts and then for others to build on. One comment. So I do think there are a lot of men who see that and want to change that. And in many ways, ensuring that you're listening to the voices of all actually helps everybody. That's one of the things I love about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, is that normally the things that you're doing for those who are most marginalized literally help everybody. All people benefit within an organization. And so it is truly the boat lifts, right? The tide lifts and everybody can win in many of those situations. And I think so much of competition comes from lack of abundance, right? It is seen like, well, there's just one thing. And the shift is like, but there are many things that one can do. And so I have found often some of my favorite bosses, some of my favorite mentors, some of my favorite leaders that I co-lead with are men, often men who have diverse backgrounds, or moms or wives who are really strong and in many ways see women as partners, as equal, and like you can do a lot with that partnership. And I've met plenty of men who aren't that. And I think as I've gone on with my career, I have the great privilege, and I recognize this is a straight privilege. I have tried to choose work environments that have more diversity embedded in them, because they just truly are like way more enjoyable to work in. And I was lucky. And then I went from business school and I went to go work at General Mills, not because I thought I was a company that had great diversity, but it did, but because I thought I learned a lot about marketing. And then why I stayed at General Mills for 18 years. I stayed because there were so many women around me. It was just a really delightful place to raise my children and raise my career. Like there wasn't like a tussle. There was just women kind of everywhere. And women were kind of everywhere. It just was an easier place to work. And then over the course of my career there were less and less women at my level, and it didn't feel the same. And sometimes I was in rooms where there was a lot of men, that didn't feel the same. And I got to the point where I was like, this is no fun anymore. And so I left, but that was a movement of privilege. I had the opportunity to leave, and I had enough financial means to leave, and that isn't always true. And now I actually try to choose my companies based on that. And I turn down jobs if there isn't diversity. And I'll tell that to CEOs who interview me, of like, I just don't see it here. And I recognize that is a spot of privilege, but I do think over time, there are environments, there are businesses, there are organizations where diversity and equity and inclusion are valued. That does not mean those organizations are perfect. They're nowhere close, because like perfection doesn't exist in the world, but they are trying to be better. And in those environments, it is so much easier to lead authentically because you have psychological safety. You can be yourself. It's way easier to be confident, right? And when you're confident, you can be yourself and you can help others, because like the situation around you is setting you up to be more successful. And in the environments where that isn't true, I think it is really tough. And I don't have a good answer for that environment other than to try and get yourself one of these. Or that's when I think allyship with other women and men of color and others who are just only infused coming together can give you power and energy and like not feeling alone. Like I as you can tell, I believe like connectedness helps a lot in this world. And that's where I've seen community in those organizations begin to make changes. But make no mistake, that's like takes a long time and it's super frustrating. And it's very draining for all involved when you're in that situation.
Thank you so much, Angie. Wow. Thanks for recounting all of those experiences and offering some real tips on how to work with it. I see in the chat that Julie Davinson had said, I'd love to answer that question coming out of the exact situation where I was in a leadership role. Is it this question, Julie? And would you like to answer it now?
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant I would like to get an answer to that question, having come out of a similar situation, not to ask it, but no, I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Oh, okay, lovely. All right, I got to scroll down a little bit. We've got a lot of wonderful questions.
Can I just jump in and make a quick comment?
Please do.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on Sherry's wonderful question. That's such a brave question, and it's a really important one. Yeah, I think when we frame the issues as being women against men, it blocks our ability to really see the core issues of what causes these oppressions and in different ways. And I think for me, the way that I framed it at Planet Women and my work that I've done before is to really frame it as patriarchy and colonization. So, but for me, especially colonization, because I mean, if we're just talking from the US perspective, I mean, there's many global perspectives of the way that these oppressions work, but from the US perspective, I mean, this country was built on genocide and free labor and the subjugation of many people. And that wound and those systems, as much as we want to feel like we're beyond them, we're not. They just look a different way at this particular moment where we're living. And I think that patriarchy is really the center of colonialism. So patriarchy is within colonialism, and colonialism is the bigger kind of issue. And because women can definitely replicate the systems of power and hierarchy, and use the patriarchy for their own upliftment or whatever, So really being aware of these deeper historical issues and these deeper historical contexts, and where we're positioned in them now, to think of ways to create systems that are more collaborative.
Thank you. Farmer C?
Yeah. I'll just quickly add, I'll elaborate. It was built on genocide, human trafficking, and enslavement, because the labor was free because it was taken. Yeah. And I will say, when it comes to the patriarchy, I think something women have to do is understand that it requires participation to some degree, and there needs to be some accountability. It's not as if the men are able to just come and take over every single thing without there being some allowance of it happening. And so we have to understand what role we play in that as mothers and sisters and teachers, and all of the various roles, important roles that we play in society, often the most nurturing roles, right? What role do we play as enabling that system? And that oftentimes I don't hear that piece of it. It's, how do I fight against it? I think first you have to understand, how are you participating in it? And as you're looking at that participation, look at some other areas that you're participating in. Are you able to say marginalized people and not complete the thought with marginalized by who, or underserved? Well, then who's overserved? Under-resourced? Well, who's over-resourced? We have to be very honest with ourselves and take accountability, and think then, when you're able to have that internal conversation, that's when you're able to truly come and contribute something to the collective.
Thank you. Oh, I feel like we're really touching on the areas that are often not discussed in public forums. And it's so important to create space for that. So thank you so much. So Lane has a question in the chat, which is, how do we show up then as women in the face of systems that devalue our voice and perspective? And I think that Farmer C has answered that to some degree, which is, we need to look at ourselves and see how we're contributing. But what is the invitation we can offer up to ourselves and to others? So we're kind of moving now into where do we see some signs of hope?
I see, signs of hope with my 13-year-old, my 11-year-old daughters, hopefully my 6-year-old white son sometime. He'll learn from them, but their conversations are different. there, my daughter had a 13th birthday party she organized with half boys, half girls, and the boys waited for the girls to serve themselves, which was nice. But then they all sat down and just had a really cool conversation. And there was like, just back and forth and laughing, and there was respect and honoring without, it was just very different, without seeing, the potential and either to be different or less or other. So those kinds of things give me hope. And in terms we call on each other to do, I feel like particularly recently, like when I feel in and I see women, they say, I'm going to feel into this. I'm going to feel into this. I've seen women say that to each other in private, but they would never in a company setting. I'm like, what does that mean? Is that like, what about like the data and the backup and the scenario analysis, which we do and we know how to do. But I think there's that, to me, if feeling into this is feeling into what your mind knows, what your gut knows, and what your heart knows, and being able to bring all three to the table. And we've been very head-based. We tend to be very, very just head-based in our meetings in our company world. And when you get into the gut and the heart, you start to see that by actually working with other women and developing a language that is okay, if it's a different one, then being very just head-based and speaking and feeling like we're imposters because that's how we are in the room, but actually, work with other women or just supporting other women to speak in the way they feel compelled and in authenticity to speak. And these kinds of places are starts, and the women's circle that Angie just brilliantly leads are starts. But I think we're having to go outside of our companies and our communities to be able to feel okay to speak that way versus doing it inside. And that's where I think, just having first, like really listening and giving space to other women is the first step I would take.
Great. Well, we just have 2 minutes left, so I'd love to hear just a final comment from each of you. Angie, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I would say what gives me hope, I also have daughters and a son who I do believe are being raised in a world where they see the need to behave differently than maybe those that they see around them behaving, and that they're coming into that. I also, what gives me hope is that I believe women can get energy from each other in the way that they cannot get from men. And when I see more women connecting and I see the confidence and energy that comes out of that, I see something super powerful. And I get to see that in our circles. I also get to see it where I work, but even more importantly, I think I see it just in my day-to-day life and in the community that I live in. And I'm finding that when I'm run down, that's who I'm just deciding to turn to more and more in terms of self-care. Like I do other things for self-care, but one of the things I've upped in the past couple of years is connection as a way of having endless energy, which I feel like women need because there's so much to do. And so I just think if there's one thing you take away from the panel today, at least from me in this group, there's a lot of really amazing women here. That chat was just full of awesome, so much good vibes and questions and thoughts. And this room, Zoom room, staying connected would be incredibly powerful in terms of what that could do for the planet and for our society.
Thank you. Liza?
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is, first of all, spaces like this where we can really get into the depth of these issues and get a little more clarity around how these issues are really playing out in our lives. And so I appreciate that. I also have 2 daughters as well, 10 and 11. And when I was their age, I had already learned to keep my mouth shut and to really be a good girl and do what I was told. And my life has been about trying to undo that. I mean, even as I am in my mid-40s, I'm still working on that. And my 2 daughters are definitely have learned the power of negotiation and their voice and, making sure that they're heard in a way that I didn't have. And so that gives me hope as well. And also, I just appreciate what all my fellow panelists have shared, Laura and Angie and Clarenda, and their experiences. And that gives me hope as well.
Thank you. Well, Clarenda, will you give us the last word?
Absolutely. What gives me hope? So I have two daughters. I had both of them by the time I was 18 years old. And now both of my daughters are homeowners. Their children will inherit what I'm building here. And so the ability to do that gives me hope. Now, the system didn't make it easy, but the fact that I was able to achieve it, and I know others have been able to, despite challenges placed before them. And I find hope in the agricultural space. You know, I am finding different conversations taking place with women in agriculture and how we connect with each other. I see hope even in my customer base, which for many, you know, my first 3 years of existence was primarily Black women, even though I know white women drink tea. And I'm like, white women, you drink tea, what's the problem? And having to even evolve beyond that, and now seeing a loyal customer base of white women who are able to embrace fully the fact that we care that you're working so hard to create this product for our well-being and the planet, and we value the fact that you are a Black woman. We see your color, and that gives me hope as well.
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to thank our panelists and also Regenerative Rising for this opportunity to connect with one another. Okay, we're slightly over time.
You guys were awesome, and I'm so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was really what I wanted to see the conversation be today, and the depth and the honesty and the reveal. So I'm deeply grateful to each of you for bringing yourselves, and for all of you who are in the community here, putting in your thoughts, your questions. Susan, what a beautiful job of moderating the discussion. So you have fulfilled literally like the thing I was seeking here for this experience, for us to go this deep. I think to a lot of folks mentioning, you know, we just don't talk about these things enough, and we need to be talking about them. The only way to like break the bonds that keep us down are to name them and to witness them. And this is what we're doing together. And hopefully it'll just give each of us a little bit more courage, a little bit bigger spring in our step. I love Farmer C. If you need to think of sassy and power, you just call that woman up into your mind, and you're just going to like put a little bit more spring in your step. And I highly encourage you to follow her on IG, because she's, yes, you are lovely. And I adore you. I adore all of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you.